All right, welcome to the Aaron Werner podcast on iCode Media. Today I've got Kristy and Adam joining me, and I've known them before and really got intrigued when I heard them share their story on a webinar regarding practices that had a net $1 million or more, and thought it was pretty neat and wanted to dive a little bit deeper into the how they got to that point and the keys that made them successful. But before we jump into that, Kristy and Adam, can you guys introduce yourselves to everyone?
Yes, I'm Dr. Kristy Bryan, and this is Dr. Adam Bryan. We owned a practice here in North Carolina. We went to Southern College of Optometry. That's where we met. And about 3 years after graduation, we went out on our own for our practice here.
Yeah, so we opened cold in Holly Springs, North Carolina, which is a suburb of Raleigh, in 2009. And over the course of the next 14 years, grew the practice to a pretty substantial level with several associates. And in late 2020, we sold the practice, 2022, excuse me, sold the practice to a private equity firm. And since then, have been a little bit in the clinic, mostly out of the clinic, trying to figure out what the next big thing is.
I like it.
And we're happy to be here to talk
thanks for
about
having me.
our story with you, Aaron.
Very cool. I'm happy to have you guys. So you met in optometry school. I don't think I knew that.
Yeah.
And then when you opened 3 years out of school, you both were working in the clinic together?
We alternated days. So we kept our old jobs. I was driving like an hour and a half on 2 or 3 days a week to work outside our own practice. So we did 2 days each, I think, in the beginning. And then eventually I got to quit first to devote, full time at Carolina Family Vision. And then at some point we felt safe enough that we let him quit his outside job too.
Yeah,
I
but
like that. So
like
I'm curious,
technically, we always talk about, or people talk about you guys working together, and technically we work together to run the business and develop the business and whatnot. But as far as the clinic is concerned, in 14 years, I think there might have been one day that we actually worked together in the clinic. So, and that was an odd day. It was late in the game to both be, on the schedule at the same time
It was for family reasons. So one of us was always off the clock enough that they could go pick a kid up from school or, at least once we only had Carolina Family Vision to do, it was nice to be able to tag team the home stuff as well as the office.
And that was, especially from your perspective, in running and developing the clinic and growing it, having those, 2 or 3 days outside of patient care was critical in allowing us to realize the growth that we were able to. If we were both in the clinic 5 days a week, it would have been a much bigger challenge to grow the practice substantially.
That makes a lot of sense. I was going to ask how you guys worked together, and you jumped in and answered it. So you both worked a couple days in the clinic, and you both had a couple of admin days, if you will, to work on the clinic?
Eventually, not at first, not for years.
Okay.
Yeah, those other days were spent at other clinics for probably what?
For you, it was probably 3 years, and for myself, I think it was about 5. Okay. I was definitely seeing patients 5 days a week, 3 days in our clinic, and 2 days outside, and then she was 2 days and 2 or 3 days outside until she was just 2 days in our clinic.
But by the end, yes, I spent my 2 or 3 days outside of clinic on the business running, because once you get to a certain point, even in the beginning, you're the CEO, the COO, all of those things, and those can be full-time jobs depending on how the size of a clinic. And it really let us make that turn from being a mom and pop to being a much larger organization.
Got it. How did you divide the administrative work initially? Was one of you the natural CEO, somebody else the COO, CFO?
It's changed over time. Adam has always been the numbers guy. He's always done the QuickBooks and the big picture financials. I would do more of the operations. And I like numbers too, but more of a like revenue per patient and how many frames did we sell this month, and those kind of like minute numbers, I guess, or day to day numbers, where he would do the more net cost of goods and financials of taxes and all the stuff that I would defer to our CFO.
Yeah. So I think it's important that we all appreciate our strengths and then find someone who can supplement us on where we're not as strong.
For sure.
That is definitely,
Yes.
there's definitely some complementary strengths and weaknesses in this team. And all the gaps that I have, fortunately, and there's a lot of them, fortunately, she fills those in very, very well.
And when I'm consulting, when you're alone, like you're a solo practitioner, it's finding those people that fill your gaps. You want to use your strengths and do what you're really good at, but don't be afraid to pay someone to do the things that you're not good at, or lean on the strengths of your staff to pick up the slack.
Yep. I was listening to, I can't remember where I heard this, or maybe I read it, but they were talking about the cost of missed opportunity. And so often we hear, I don't know if I can afford a CFO, or I can afford the numbers person, or I can afford somebody to balance me out. Mm-hmm. And the question came back, well, how much are you losing by not paying for that person right now?
Right. And if you're really looking, you can find fractional COOs, fractional CMOs. Like you can find experts not outside of the industry. Sometimes you have to look outside the industry to come and help you, especially once you get to a higher level. I mean, when you're running a $2, $3, $4 million practice, some of that stuff's going to be outside your wheelhouse from what you learned in optometry school, right? And so I tell you, don't be afraid to seek good advice and surround yourself with the people that do fill in those gaps.
Right. And, especially when you start, adding a zero or whatnot, doubling and tripling, 1% or 2%, early on, that wasn't much to, shake a stick at. But when, 2% for a $3 million practice is $60,000. And so, it adds up very quickly. So if you don't take advantage of opportunities or don't, kind of get out in front of things, it can bite you very quickly. And so I think we have been able, again, I think because we're in the team situation and we had, time outside of the clinic on a regular basis to devote to these sorts of things, we were able to, be more proactive than some people who are just stuck in the clinic, 40, 50 hours a week have the opportunity to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I see that. Did you guys structure time to talk about the business and then time where you didn't talk about the business, just family time? Or
No.
is it
Basically, if we were awake, it was fair game.
Yeah.
Whether or not you're laying in bed staring at the ceiling, in 2010, wondering how you're going to, pay the employee and how you're going to pay rent, or, we're driving to Disney World, in 2012 and we got two small kids in the back and they're staring at their tablets. So we're talking, business for 8 straight hours. It was never off the table.
Okay.
Yeah. We spent a lot of time with our kids. Of course, when we're with them, it wouldn't be a big deal, but we have a lot of time together. So yeah, we did not really separate it. We're not talking. Sometimes on vacation, we're like, okay, no office, but talking about our business didn't feel like work. Now, I didn't want to be fielding calls from the office or, being on call, but if we were talking about it together, it didn't bother us to do that, outside of the clinic.
Right. I mean, we're together a lot. We've been together a lot over the last, 15 years since, we opened the business. And so it's just natural. Just if we're at lunch, if we're in the car, if we're not actively doing something, then, it's fair game.
Very cool. I've always wondered how different couples structure that. I don't work with my wife, and she's a high school teacher, and we understand what each other does and appreciates it, but I don't think we fully internalize each other's jobs.
Sure.
So we try to keep it no business at home. So I'm
No,
always curious
that's
about
nice.
others.
Very healthy, I'm sure.
Yeah. Two very different worlds.
All right.
So, Kristy, you mentioned surrounding yourself with people to help you, surrounding yourself with community. And those who've listened to the podcast know that I'm bullish on, while we're independent, we're not on an island by ourselves. And I know that, well, everybody knows that I'm a proud Vision Source member and part of that community. You guys shared that you were as well throughout your journey. Well, I don't want to talk specifically Vision Source. I do think it's important that independent practice owners and independent business owners have that group of people they can rely on, they can take challenges to, they can share successes with, they can ask questions of. What are your guys' thoughts on surrounding yourself with a community like that?
Yeah, entrepreneurship in general can be very lonely. You can really feel alone sometimes. Like your friends don't really understand if they have corporate jobs, and sometimes your family doesn't understand what you're going through. And so, any opportunity we would get, we would definitely try to take advantage of it. We had really good mentors who were our first jobs coming out, our bosses. And then when we went on our own, at first, they were our, we would ask them lots of questions and they were super helpful. I'd still call them and ask questions to this day. And then, of course, we had consultants that we surrounded ourselves with to help you, again, not feel alone. Sometimes that's just them telling you stories of other practices. And Vision Source did provide some level of that, and I'm really grateful for the meetings that we did have. I think the biggest thing for Vision Source is going to that national meeting. That was really where you can feel community. Our local meetings were hit or miss, whether we would have them or not. And so I think the community is there to be had. You just have to seek it. Outside of your buying group, I think now we're so lucky to have so much, the forums on Facebook, and that was not popular or not around back then. And I think so easy to jump on and ask, thousands of colleagues how they feel about certain, or how they have encountered this at their practice, or that is a huge benefit to operating today, is that was not available when we were on our own.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so, yes, so as you said, Aaron, we joined Vision Source so we opened in October of 2009. We have actually been members of Vision Source since probably mid 2008. We knew the local administrator, super nice guy, and he let us in. They knew we were opening. We'd already signed the paperwork and all that, and it's great because you're just you're paying a percentage, and our whatever percentage of zero is zero. So we got to go to the meetings, we got to utilize the equipment deals, but like she said, it's the mentorship and the getting into a circle of people who have done it before. And as you know, Aaron, and as everybody in eye care knows, on average, the Vision Source practitioner is more successful than the average, solo practitioner or group practitioner. And so these are mostly people who do it really well. And so, you are the people, or you become the people that you surround yourself with. And so we're fresh out of school, got a couple of years under our belt of patient care, but we still don't know much about business. So we, sit in these meetings and listen to these older doctors who have done it right, and go, we couldn't afford to go to the national meeting for a while, but going to the local ones, it was really nice. And in business, there's a lot of, secret sauce type, stuff where, this restaurant probably won't talk to that restaurant and whatnot. And, you can't necessarily call the guy down the street, but in Vision Source, everybody's kind of working towards a common goal. And so, these doctors, they don't necessarily see you as, competition or, are scared of helping grow your business. So they're they're speaking about their experience, and you just kind of absorb it, and it really helps to make the learning curve much shorter, and so just trying to take advantage of those opportunities, and now there's a lot more groups. There's IDOC and PECA and Vision Source. So I don't know about the other ones, but I'm sure they have a lot of great doctors in them and a lot of great opportunities. So I would certainly suggest that any new or even established practitioner, if you want to grow to the next level, get in one of these communities that helps you learn the way and whatnot. So, because as she said, when you're an entrepreneur, you can definitely be on an island, and that's a tough place to be if you want to grow.
That is a tough place to be. You said something, Adam, that I really liked. You said that as being part of that group, you became, you rose to the level of the group. I can't remember the exact term, but you used the word you became. And part of my role at Vision Source, we measure the success of practices, and we consistently outgrow the industry average year over year. And I've always wondered if what comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? Is it because of we're just finding the right people, or is it that we're bringing people into the culture that just helps elevate people in doctors and entrepreneurs quicker, I guess? And if there's a good idea that somebody has, it spreads more rapidly, and so collectively we can all grow a little bit better.
I always, when I describe Vision Source to someone outside the industry, when I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to a Vision Source meeting," I always say it's a group of like-minded optometrists. Very pro private practice, and I do feel like we have some common values, and I think so that's, like you said, that's the other side of it. I think it attracts people like-minded optometrists, and then because of what they're doing and what we're all doing, because we're sharing, then we collectively grow together.
Yep.
Yeah, and it is a little bit of both, the chicken and the egg. I mean, because anybody can theoretically, or if they're in the rules or whatnot, get into Vision Source or one of the other groups. But if you're not a like-minded person, you're probably not going to stick around for very long. And so, you got to be somebody with an open mind. You got to look past the, royalty that you're paying. You got to, be willing to, listen to other people's ideas and decide whether or not they're going to work in your practice, and be willing to try things that you may be uncomfortable with. And so, yeah, I think it ends up being a lot of like-minded people because of you have to be willing to do those things in order to be successful with it.
To make it worth it, yeah.
It's definitely a culture that that you engage in. It's not a passive culture.
Correct.
Or at least most of the practices I see doing well are not passively sitting on the sidelines. They're
correct.
It's
they're
what
getting
you
in the
make
game
of
and
it.
playing.
It's with anything. It's a resource that you can maximize. You can dabble in, or you can really kind of go all in and try to get as much out of it as you can.
Yeah. And I'm curious because you guys were in your Vision Source group from your whole life cycle of your practice, right? Coming in cold. And I love, Adam, you said, zero, whatever percentage of zero is zero. So it was great to get in early. And then as you grew, I'm curious if your perception or what you were getting from the attendance of the group and attendance from your membership in Vision Source changed slightly. I know mine did, but I'm curious to see what your guys' perspective on that is.
Yeah, it did for me. Both times that our 5 years came up, I was like, I don't know, are we really getting out of it? Again, if I'd gone to the national meeting, I was a little rah-rah on it. I felt pretty good on it. But if it had been a minute, I was like, I don't know, are we just paying for our discounts? And Adam, the numbers guy, would be like, no, like our royalties, the discounts we have available are much better. And again, then I'd say, okay, there's training I can use on here. There's all these things that I can use that makes me feel that I'm getting more return on our investment of the royalties. We had consultants once we got to a certain point telling us that you really don't need to pay this. You can negotiate your own deals. But if you work at, I call it, especially with the vendor side of it, if you work that game, and it is a game,
Oh yeah.
if you work the game of rebate this, discount that, bonus this, you really can make a nice margin. If you don't, they're confusing, and sometimes the vendor programs are confusing for a reason. But you have to kind of be smarter than the average bear and really you work those reps, get them to explain it to you, and work those programs. There's a lot of savings on top of just the price difference. There's a lot of savings to be had in the vendor game. Well, that's what I call it.
Yeah, and what we got out of being members definitely evolved over time. Early on we're sponges absorbing all of the information that we could, and the discounts or the deals were good, better than nothing for sure. But as we grew and we had this massive like contact lens business, the partnership that we had like with Cooper Vision, was paying our royalties like 4 times over between the savings on the private label contacts and then the rebate program that we were in. And so we definitely took advantage of different aspects of Vision Source as we grew. And from a practice management side, it was more specific what we were trying to get out of like the exchange or the local meetings versus just taking it all in. Instead of 2010 in 2021, we're much more focused on trying to get this piece of information or that piece of information.
And then you serve your turn to give back.
Exactly.
So you're coming to those meetings and people are getting stuff from you because you've evolved. So it's a give and take.
Cool. I love hearing that because that's exactly been my experience coming in. And, my dad joined early in the process. Actually, my senior year of high school is when he joined. And so I grew up a Vision Source kid. But coming into the meetings and taking over his practice, I was a huge sponge. And then as we grew to one of the larger practices in our group, becoming more of that mentor role. But I learned a lot, and I still learn a lot from a lot of these young kids that are opening cold now, and their perspective and how they see the world. And even when they ask questions on how I should handle an HR issue or, what piece of equipment should I buy or should I buy another practice? I almost feel selfish that I'm learning more from that experience and that conversation than they are, because I can add all the experience that I've got along with it. But I agree we're hyper-focused in the practice because we've got systems in place. I'm a little bit more surgical in what I'm looking for to grow, as opposed to just give me everything.
Yeah.
And that's, and as Kristy pointed out, and you've mentioned it too, Aaron, like the availability of the Facebook groups, whether it's the original one, the ODs on Facebook, or, the hipper one that's ODs on finance, the opportunities that folks have to ask questions, whether you're an associate, whether you're wanting to open, or whether you just opened cold, or any scenario that you're in, there's somebody out there that's been there before, and they're in a lot of cases willing to give you some answers. And that's I think the two of us have absolutely enjoyed over the last handful of years the opportunities to help pass on some of this, knowledge and to help younger doctors and people who are just earlier in the journey.
No, I love that. And I love that you both reference it as a game. I like calling it a game, and some may get offended by it, but because a game may not sound as serious, but games are fun. You can play games, you can win games, and even if you had a bad quarter, you still got 3 more quarters in the game to come back and try to win.
Exactly.
But I think the important part of the game is learning the rules. And if you know the rules of the game, then you're playing it, and you can adapt accordingly. And any of our mentors that we look at in sports, whether it's Kobe Bryant, who talked about reading the entire referee manual, so he knew exactly where they were supposed to be, and he can adjust accordingly.
Yes.
To Tom Brady and the Patriots dynasty, Lord knows that they walked the fine line on rules on a couple of times, right? But when you learn the rules, that you're playing the game and the game's not playing you.
Right.
So it's taking advantage, like you guys said, of the programs, no matter what group you're a part of, but understanding that there's a way to do this and there's a way to do it properly for your business that will help you succeed. And that I'm curious on your take on this, because as optometrists, sometimes I think we need to start an Optometry Anonymous group where we can raise our hand and admit that we're afraid to make money and we don't want to charge patients anything. But the more money we make, the more we can invest back in the practice and help more patients. And clearly you guys have been very successful of that. Have you had any conversations, or what's your thought when you talk to doctors and coach with them when they're afraid to make money, afraid to charge for the services that they're performing?
I actually was just hours ago texting a client who was giving refractions away for free, and has been the whole time she's run her business. And we're like, nope, you need to charge for refractions. And she's like, they're yelling at my front desk. And I was like, you cannot do free services and run a business. If you want to, it's just the way it is. You don't go to your dentist and get free anything. You don't go to MDs, and we all know the OMDs are not giving anything away for free. So you just have to know, like, your kids like to eat, your staff's kids like to eat. Like, you also have a responsibility to pay those bills and pay payroll. And it's not about the money, on that bottom line. It's the more you make, the bigger you grow, the more staff you have, the more families you affect. And so by playing small and doing stuff for free, you're doing a disservice to yourself and honestly the profession. It's our value. You're lowering our worth if we're giving stuff away for free. So I have to look at it that way, that yes, we are all soft-hearted. I mean, I think us the optometrists, we can get walked over sometimes because we are just the nicest guys. I mean, it's true. That's why our liability is so low, because no one sues us, because we're such nice individuals for the most part. But it bites us in the butt sometimes when we are afraid to value ourselves, value our education, value our services and what we're providing. So I try to think about it as my responsibility to my staff was always how I was like, look, I got to pay for them. They're expensive.
And today you almost, you have to, when you look at the rising, costs that are involved with becoming an optometrist, I would, when you look at the cost of the schools and just everything involved with it, if you're going to get out and not, be a good business person, and you're not going to charge people appropriately for the services that you provide, then it's going to be, you're digging yourself, deeper into the hole. So, in order to make it work financially, you really have to today, because it just, the hundreds of thousands of dollars it takes to get into the game, you've got to be a good quotes player in order to be successful. And I think, Aaron, as you pointed out, there are a lot of people online that are talking about wouldn't recommend for my son or daughter and whatnot, and I think it has a lot to do with the short-sightedness of the entry cost, which is a whole nother discussion in and of itself. But if you're not gonna then be a good player and a good business person, then it might not make sense if they're gonna settle for not mediocrity, but being average.
Playing small. You're not playing to the full extent of your ability and your potential. And again, when you see it as taking care of more people, because that's really what you're in it for, the money has to be there to allow you to do that, because you're not running a charity. And
No.
so sometimes you see these practices that aren't worth a lot, or they're not netting a lot. And it's just that difference between, being a little bit, and I'm not even saying aggressive. They're afraid to sound salesy. They're afraid to charge what they're really worth. And it's a disservice to them and the people around them and the people to come.
Yep. Discovering the impact of LifeMeter this year has been truly transformative for motivating my patients with macular degeneration to embrace carotenoid supplements. With this non-invasive device, we can now quantitatively show that supplements are working. LifeMeter assesses carotenoid concentration in the skin, reflecting fruit and vegetable intake, and indicating levels in other vital tissues like the retina and brain. Supported by over 30 peer-reviewed publications, LifeMeter's accuracy, consistency, and effectiveness have been validated in 2,000 subjects of varying background. What's more, it offers the flexibility to prescribe the best-suited products for each patient. My patients love knowing their numbers and witnessing improvements in as little as a month. Better yet, compliance with carotenoid supplements has surged, doubling our sales of MacuHealth since the LifeMeter's implementation. As doctors of optometry, we cannot do what we do without our team. And Para-Optometrics are allied health professionals who assist us in providing the highest level of vision care to our patients. We at iCode Education want to support you and your team in the Para-Optometric certification process, which is why not only do we have resources available, training resources available for your team to help prepare them for the test, but we also have a discount code specifically for the Aaron Werner podcast listeners, which gives you $100 off for 12 months. So you can use the code AWP 2024, that's AWP 2024, to get $100 off for a 12 months code. We'll put the link in the show notes, but you can visit iCodeEducation.com and search for Para-Optometric training to see what those courses are like. I'm reminded by the quote, I believe it was from Marianne Williamson, and I don't remember the whole quote, but it talked about how our being small doesn't serve the world, and we were meant to shine. And I think sometimes we're, as nice people, we're afraid to shine because we feel like that puts us on a pedestal, that puts us in a different category than the people we're serving. But I think we owe it to them, and I think they expect us to shine. That's why they walk through the front door.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And you're better serving them when you're living up to being the leader that you can be, the business owner that you can be, and the steward of the practice. I mean, our practices do such good for the people and the communities that they're in. That's what I think could help you overcome that nice guy syndrome of playing small and not worthy. Is to look at all the good you can do if you just step into what you can be.
Oh, absolutely. And this may sound silly. I'm curious your guys' thoughts on it, but I think that we're better doctors when our offices look nicer, when the paint is fresher, when our staffs make more money. I believe all of that falls into us providing better care. Now, technical care, you could argue that one way or another, but when people feel good, they perform good. When people feel comfortable in an environment, they're more open to hearing recommendations and trusting the recommendations that they get. If I go into a nice restaurant that's very nice and the waiter's put together and well-spoken and knows the menu, I'm much more likely to trust the recommendations than somewhere where paint's peeling off the walls and the waiter has to look over my shoulder at the menu because he doesn't know what it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's taking pride in what you're offering, and you could be the best clinician in the world, but if patients don't want that you're sitting in a dirty waiting room, they're going to think less of you, of the whole experience. Right. Yes. And so, it's every aspect of the business needs to reflect how good you are in the exam room.
Yeah. So, and all those aspects take money.
Yes, you got to spend money to make money, I like to say.
And making money is okay.
It is okay.
It is, especially with, when you educate the patients, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Is it important for you to have this, test run annually? Why is it important that we put you in this pair of lenses versus the, generic, Walmart / Costco / Sam's Club progressive. Yeah, we can do that one, and we can do it for, really expensive, but I wouldn't wear that one, and I don't want you to wear that one. I want you to wear the one that's going to, help you, perform the best in your, profession in your everyday life. But if you don't teach them, then they only understand the dollars, and people are willing to pay for things that are upgrades, that are that have a reason for, to make that they want them or that they need them. But if you're not willing to go that extra mile, then you're not going to get them, or B, maybe you just kind of put your head down and be like, nobody wants to pay for this, so I'm just gonna do the easy thing like an Eeyore, and then you don't end up being successful.
I think that makes me think of two things: that you have to be okay with hearing no. You're not selling, you're educating and recommending. If they get it, that's great. You can put your head on the pillow knowing you told them what was best, what your recommendation for their best visual solution was, and they know that you did that. So you kind of have to get okay with hearing no. But also, I told someone this yesterday actually, that if you don't tell them what's latest and greatest and best, and they go see someone else, or they hear that their neighbor got this, I'm like, my doctor never told me that. You're the expert that they are paying to come and see. They value you. They value your expertise and your experience and recommendations. And if you're holding back on recommending because you're worried about their pocketbook, again, the disservice word comes back up, that you're not really fully serving them and educating them. Whether they get it or not really isn't the issue. It's, did you tell them the best available for their needs?
Yep, 100%. And as a consumer, I want the best product being offered to me. Whether I'm going to a music venue, I expect everybody in that band to be giving me their best for the value that the ticket that I bought. At a restaurant, I want the chefs and the waiter and everybody to be bringing their A game, right? And so I think we owe that to our patients, dare I say customers in our practice, that, they're expecting the A game. They get a voice in it and they get a choice, just like I do at a restaurant. I may not get the steak and lobster every time, but I may want it this time. Who knows? And so they deserve that recommendation as well.
You don't want them to look at you and go, "Oh, I'm not going to tell him about the lobster."
Yeah.
Yeah. He looks like
he looks
like
yes.
a country fried steak guy, so I'm not going to give him the filet mignon.
Right.
And
it sounds silly when you put it in those terms.
Yeah.
and right, and obviously in today's world, they're going to hear it somewhere, whether it's on their computer, whether it's on TV, whether it's from their neighbor or from their mom's Facebook group, or they're going to hear about the best somewhere. And like she said, you're not going to be in business very long if, your patients are questioning, well, why didn't my doctor tell me X, Y, Z?
Yeah. And that's one of the things that when I just took over ownership of the practice, and I was, hyper focused on money and how much was in the bank every day and how much we made and what we were doing, listening to colleagues and hearing that, they were able to be successful by recommending or selling a certain product or service in potentially a market that I thought wouldn't be able to afford it. And so if they could do it, it gave me that permission to do it as well. I think sometimes it's hard for us to look outside of the four walls of our business, as much as we say we do. We're ingrained there. That's where we spend most of our lives. And so being able to step away, seeing inside other people's business and their lives and their successes helps, at least for me, gave me permission to be even more successful.
Yeah, for sure. That makes me think of sitting in a Vision Source local meeting where I heard someone talk about how they sold this patient 5 pairs, and that was like not an unusual thing at their practice. And there's that sense of, yeah, if they can do it down the street, why can't we do it? So yeah, that's another reason to try to get off your island
Yes.
and engage.
Well, and just it helps make your island that much better, right? You don't have to live in somebody else's island. It's still yours. It's still
Right.
your business. It doesn't make it any less yours or you less independent. It just gives you that support that, quite frankly, we all need.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I haven't done a single sport. I grew up playing soccer and wrestling, and still play to this day. And even on our adult teams, there's always somebody who steps up as the coach, as the person to give feedback and whatnot. And I think it's important that we have those, that we, look to experts, that when appropriate, we spend money on consultants to give us an outside view of what we're doing. And I can't imagine that even though they're at the top of the game, Taylor Swift or Mahomes or Travis Kelce, like, they've all got their own people looking at them saying,
Sure.
you could have done this better. You could have done that better. Let's tweak this here and there, just to make you even more at the top.
Of course. And that's probably a misconception that, he or she is the best. And so, they don't need anyone or to help them. But those are most likely the people getting the most help, because they recognize their deficiencies, whether it's in, running or throwing or singing, or in our case, if you're not good with numbers, getting a great CPA or fractional CFO. If you're not good with marketing, hiring a great marketing person, or whatever you're not good at, especially with the internet available and virtual this and virtual that available, you can fill those gaps so easily. And we all have them. Even at, $3.5 million, we still had gaps, and we had
Paid
coaches and
yeah.
consultants that we paid to help us to get better at our weaknesses. Our weaknesses weren't as great as they used to be, but they still existed. And new things would pop up that, were a bigger deal for a $3 million practice that weren't a big deal for a 2 and 1 and whatnot. And so it's being the kind of lifelong learner type thing, and always being humble and recognizing that you're not, all knowing and whatnot. It helps you to continue to put out a better product.
I like that. You guys are, we were talking before we jumped on this, you're starting to get into that world right now, right? Where helping practices, Kristy, you've mentioned you've had some calls, but helping practices in a coaching format to achieve whatever they want to achieve, right? In Vision Source terms, it's to achieve their full potential, which they define, but we all need coaches helping to get there. Tell me a little bit about what you guys are doing now.
Yeah, so it's been an interesting year since we let go of the practice, and so I'm not gonna lie, I've been floundering a little bit, and I've found some fulfillment. And actually the talk that you referenced in the beginning, I got a lot of contacts, a lot of people, direct messages, emails, and stuff from that. And so from that, I'm like, there's a lot of people that need, again, that are lonely, and they need a voice, helping them, telling, sharing our experience and things. So I dabbled with that, just helping. And I'm like, I think this is this is next. And so, exclusive to the Aaron Werner podcast, because we're getting ready to launch. So I've convinced Adam to come along with me. We're going to be the Prosper Doctors.
Cool.
We're going to do coaching, consulting. I like to call it coach consulting. That's what I'm going to really specialize in. And we also want to help people in all the stages of their practice. And because of the experience that we've just been through, and then the experience from the decade before, we want to offer to help people too who are looking at towards the end of their practice, and help come in and be those eyes to show them where they can make things better before they are ultimately want to sell it, kind of like fixing your house up before you put it on the market. And then, or just practices that want to grow to go to that next level, come in and kind of think of it like practice rescue. If you ever watched Bar Rescue,
Yeah.
come in and just tell them all the things. And be as involved as they want us to be on implementing those changes too. So several different services that we're wanting to help doctors with.
Yeah, I think that the whole, the process from, 6-8 months before we sold the practice and now the, year and a quarter after, we've learned so much that I think is completely unavailable to anyone who hasn't actually gone through the process. I know there's a lot of folks that have walked people through it, but until you've been through it yourself, you just don't really understand a lot of the mental and spiritual and emotional challenges and financial that come with that process. And so I think a place where we can really help owners is helping them, or helping to identify people who are thinking about that, and then helping get them to the closing table and then through that process as smoothly and financially beneficial as possible. Because if you're, if you haven't, done the things that you need to do, then it can be an eye-opening experience. And so we just want to utilize our personal experience in that and the growth and whatnot to really just help people succeed.
Awesome. That's fantastic. And we'll link to your contact information for the Prosper Doctors in the show notes. So if anybody's finding themselves in that place, feel free to reach out to Kristy and Adam. So that's exciting. I love seeing our community just give back. Right.
Yeah. We've been there and felt that loneliness and that, isolation, but, I've always wanted to help the people, that come behind us, learn from our mistakes. Yeah. We went through those tough times, the good times. And, again, if we can shorten the learning curve for other people, all the better.
Absolutely. It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from Lori Sorensen that says the definition of an expert is just somebody who's made more mistakes than you have.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you guys taking time and sharing your story and coming on and joining us. Always gracious hosts and good people and just fun to talk with. So I'm glad we could make this happen.
Yes.
All right, Aaron, thanks for having us.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate the opportunity.
We're really excited to invite you to join the Aaron Werner podcast on iCode Media's first live book club, where we review the book Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. Doctors Bryan, Kyle Clutie, and myself are super excited to share our thoughts with you. We want you to join, share your thoughts with us, ask questions, all live on Wednesday, February 21st at 4 p.m. Central Time. In the show notes of this episode, there's a link to order the book. There's also a link to join our book club live on Wednesday, February 21st at 4 p.m. Central. Look forward to seeing you there.